an explicit purpose, which is laid out in great detail usually. But along the journey, things happen. And the end may not have anything to do with the beginning, or the story might loop and diverge in other directions or quests, or into other viewpoints, if it's not a single viewpoint story. If you're working with several different characters, then each of those characters will have their own motivations and their own vocabulary. They will sound different. If you're a skilled writer, they will sound differently than the other people in the book. Okay, and so the story might loop and diverge into other viewpoints, and even if the initial situation does reach an appropriate ending that's explicated at the ending, that's really not what the story was about. Like the final lines of Romeo and Juliet, for instance. It is a revenge tragedy, and it's all about, the damage that, the vengefulness of the families caused, both to the deceased teenagers and to the city of Venice. Is it Venice? Rome. All right, that's wherever it was. But revenge is only the secondary thing that the story is about. That was the theme, and it ends up in the final speech by the mayor, whoever it is, that's denouncing the families, all are punished, the revenge is a dreadful thing that you brought upon the city, and so forth and so on. But what he ends by saying is what the story is really about. I cried at the drop of a hat, so don't be upset if I do. But anyway, he says, it's about Juliet and her Romeo. And this is what it's about. Yeah, so it's a story of revenge, and that's certainly his theme, but it's about love. And if he had left that off and just went on raving about revenge and how bad this was for public morale, you would not have, you wouldn't feel the same way about that play. Okay, so let's walk through a few sentences and paragraphs and see what we can discern in terms of patterns and endings. Now you have things that end in resolution. There's different kinds of endings. You have cliffhanger endings. You have what I call a food for thought ending, which also can have an echo ending. It means that you repeat something that you have finished. This is why some books have epilogues, is because the writer either thought they needed to make the point more strongly for the end of the book, or they're making a separate but also important point with the epilogue. Okay, so is the moral of the story also the ending? Not necessarily, it might be. The moral, such as it is, or the theme, if you prefer, is inherent in the story itself. Okay, so what is the sort of ending that might work best for that? Is it a summary? Is it the voice of a judge speaking from the podium, as it were, or is it the voice of a storyteller retrospecting over a course of years? Or is it from the participant of someone in some violent incident, bemoaning what's happened, or the voice of the criminal expressing either remorse or victory, as the case may be, or, fury at being caught? Any of those will work, but you would use a different sentence for each of those things, and they would be written with a different cadence. If it's someone, expressing fury about something, he's going to use very sharp declarative statements and, foul language expressed with exclamation points and things like that. Whereas if it is more of a resolution thing, you would expect a more conversational tone and something that's leading you through steps gently to something like, and he died very old, which kind of gives you a start at the end. But yeah, that sums it up. Okay, so yeah, sometimes the moral is just, within the story, but it reveals itself in small drops throughout the story. And you would not normally make a point of highlighting those things, but you want to make sure that they are expressed in the context of what you're writing. Okay. Now, the main thing that I can tell you about endings in terms of sentences and in paragraphs, and in terms of dialogue as a whole, is that you should keep the sentences short. This is easy, you don't even have to write it down, but you can if you want to. Okay, so I usually read stuff that I have been writing because I understand why I wrote it and can tell you that. So let me read you a few excerpts, brief excerpts, just pointing out the sorts of things that I'm talking about. Now here we have a small scene in which Jamie and Roger, his son-in-law, who is also a Presbyterian minister, and therefore, has care of the souls on Fraser's Ridge, and First Jamie's soul as well. They're sitting outside the malting shed discussing Jamie's imminent departure on a crucial errand. Are you afraid? Roger said. Okay, this ribbits you immediately. It's a very short, sharp thing, and you want to know, is he afraid? What is he afraid of? How is he feeling right now? That's a lot of stuff to evoke with 3 words. Okay, you could make it much longer, but short and sharp is best if you just want to get a single point across. The longer sentences are the ones that you can use for overall description, because you're kind of letting the reader look around at things. I was reading something from one of the Blue Pencil people this afternoon, where she was describing, a storm at sea, and we had the snapping sails and sailors, sailing across the deck and crashing into yard arms, and the waves raising up into mountains, and she said, and crashing into the water. And I was saying, but you started off by saying the craggy shore, and so we were expecting the waves to be crashing into the shore. Why are they crashing into the water? That's dissonance. Yes, and she said, oh, well, I actually meant, I was thinking, storm at sea is crashing into the water. And I said, okay, but in that case, don't put the word shore in your first sentence, because people expect something. And even if they realize the mistake, it's going to cause them glancing back and forth for a minute, even if unconsciously. You don't want to shake people out of the story the first thing. Okay, so are you afraid? He said. Jamie gave Roger a sharp look, because, it's how you would expect things. But we're not going into Jamie's head, and he's, hissing and moaning about, how scared he is about anything. We keep this very low-key, very focused, very tight. So Jamie gave Roger a sharp look, but shrugged and settled himself before replying. Okay, now here is another thing that you might want to look out for, is something that is subliminal. Most people will not notice it unconsciously, but it makes a big difference to how easy it is to draw them through your writing. And that is, okay, reached the stage where I have a word, but it doesn't come. It's when words begin with the same letter or the same sound. Alliteration. Alliteration, yes, thank you. I was thinking transliteration. No, that's not right. Yes, thank you, it's alliteration. So, Jimmy gave Roger a sharp look, but shrugged and settled himself before replying. Okay, see how that goes you through the thing, and you can see him doing it because you're listening, and the S's are keeping you focused on that. Okay, and Roger then replies, does it show? And you're picking up the S again from the previous sentence, and so keeping it close. Not on you, Roger reassured him. On Claire. Also short. Jamie looked astonished, but after a moment's contemplation, nodded slightly. I suppose it does. She sleeps when you can. Evidently, Roger's expression didn't show complete comprehension, alliteration, for Jamie sighed a little and leaned back against the wall of the malting shed. Okay, here we start to show action, and with the dialogue and so forth. With something where you're wanting to focus on emotion, particularly, you keep the action under very tight control. You don't have a lot of it, but what there is should be, visible to your mind's eye immediately. So you can see Jamie shrug and settle himself, and nodding slightly, but we're not going into any great detail about how he settled his shoulders against the rough beams, adjusting the collar of his checked shirt kind of thing, which you do see that a lot when you do Blue Pencils. And anyway, so this is nothing against the people who bring blue pencil things. Most of them are very, very good, in fact. And they mostly want to know, where am I going to sell this? Which is a problem if you write short fiction, because there's not many markets. Evidently, Roger's expression didn't show complete comprehension, for Jamie sighed a little and leaned back against the wall of the malting shed. I dream, he said simply. I can mind my thoughts well enough whilst I'm awake. That can, the Indians say the dream world is as real as this one. Sometimes I think that's true, but I often hope it's not. Okay, this is a longer period of talking than we've seen so far here. That's because it's a more important and a more subtle thought. So he's pointing out what he actually feels about what's going on in his dreams as real as this one, and I think that's true, but I hope it's not, which indicates to us that his dreams are probably not the good kind. And Roger replies, you tell Claire about your dreams? Jamie grimaced briefly. Sometimes. Well, you maybe can, but sometimes it helps to open your mind to someone when you're troubled. And some dreams are like that. Just saying what happens lets you step back from it. You can, it's only a dream, as they say. So, in this one we're expressing, his complete train of thought. So it's a longer paragraph. We keep the sentences are longer, and the maybe is sometimes to help open your mind to someone when you're troubled and dreams are like that. Just saying lets you step back from it. That's all one sentence. But that's okay, because you can hear him breathe between the clauses. It's moving slowly enough. One thing I saw in a lot of the blue pencil things was that you would get these long, very nicely descriptive sentences, but they would not have any commas in them. So you were reading this whole line without any interruptions. And people don't talk like that. You do stop and breathe in between things. So yeah, I like to include those myself. And you should have a period at the end. I mean, some things don't, some things have an ellipse, but mostly they should have periods. Yeah. So it's only a dream, as they say. Only. Roger said it softly, but Jamie nodded, his mouth relaxing a little. Okay, you can see the pattern of their conversation. Roger is responding very cautiously and circumspectly as he's, urging Jamie to say more, to, spill his guts, so to speak. And Jamie is responding by saying more because he knows Roger is listening, but that's what's the shape is taking place. And it's because of the choice of the words. That Roger is only using one or two words at a time, and then Jamie is, waxing a little fuller because he's beginning to get into a confessional mode. But Jamie nodded, his mouth relaxing a little. They were silent for a few moments, and the sounds of the wind and the local birds kept them company. Now, if you can write with a certain amount of rhythm, that's a good thing. If it doesn't come naturally to you, don't worry about it. I'm afraid for William, Jamie said abruptly. He hesitated, but added in a low voice, and I'm afraid for John. I don't know what to think of the things that might be done to him. Things I may not be able to save him from. This is getting very near the bone for Jamie. Roger glanced at him, trying not to look startled. But then he realized that Jamie didn't avoid things, nor the mention of them. He had simply accepted the fact that Roger knew the things that had been done to Jamie, and exactly why he might fear for his friend. Okay, now that's a long and complicated thought, but this is evoking things for us. We get to the emotional state of both men, and the tender relationship between them. Roger knows what happened to Jamie, and of course he would never refer to it, but now Jamie is having to refer to it because he's afraid, and Roger is the only one who he thinks he can confess this to. Let's see. So exactly why he might fear for his friend, the alliteration again. I wish I could go with you, he said. It was impulsive but true, and a genuine smile lighted Jamie's face in response. I do too, Osmara, but the folk here need you, and they'll need you a great deal more should I not come back. Okay, now we're getting down to it. He thinks he's not coming back. Roger found himself wishing that Jamie would avoid some things now and then, but reluctantly conceded that things must be said now, no matter how uncomfortable. So he answered the question Jamie hadn't asked. I'll mind them for you. The family, the wings, and all your bloody tenants too. I'm not milking your kind though, or yet looking after that damn sow and her offspring. Jamie didn't laugh, but the smile was still there. It's a comfort to me, Roger Mac, to ken you'll be here to deal with whatever might happen, and things will. Okay, are you seeing the pattern in Jamie's speech? He'll say something and then he'll add this little 1, 2, or 3 word tail that just kind of pinpoints it, and things will. Now I'm afraid, Roger said, as lightly as he could. We're adding very little body language here. What's there is mostly in terms of tones of voice and facial expression. Other than the odd shrug, there's no movement in this scene. It's all focused very closely on the conversation and the emotions between them. Now, if it were a different kind of scene, you would have a lot of explication of the motions, people coming and going, banging into things, serving food, aromatic smells filling the air, that kind of thing. This, we're keeping very clean, very tight, just between them. And that's why they're sitting in front of the malting shed, because they're not moving. Okay, now I'm afraid, Roger said as lightly as he could. I know. Luckily, Jamie didn't expand on this, but turned to practicalities. And even Gail, the demon Gail, can mind herself, he assured Roger, referring, Roger thought, to the white sow. And we, Frances, will take care for the time. Oh, as for Frances herself, I won't let her marry anyone until you come back, Roger assured him. Good. In a single word. Jamie let out his breath, and his shoulders slumped. Here we have a little bit of body language. So keep that very close. And, shoulders slumped. Again, you do the alliteration where you can, because it does create this rhythm that kind of lulls the reader along, even if and then when you interrupt it with one of those short ejaculations or responses, you get a bigger effect because the reader has just been going along. You get an exclamation point without having to use one. Good. Jamie let out his breath and his shoulders slumped. I think I will, but the dead have been talking to me. Okay. He caught Roger's lifted eyebrow. Not only my own dead. That's often a comfort to me. Should my dad or Murtaugh or Ian Moore come by once in a long while. That made him shy. He looked away. Roger made a small, non-committal sound and waited for a moment, then asked, you said, not only your own dead? Because we hope that we have evoked, by that comment, a question in the mind of the reader. When you do that, you want to answer it fairly quickly. I mean, occasionally you want to draw out the suspense, but when it's that kind of situation, you should reiterate what it is that's suspenseful, so that the reader will not, get bored waiting for the answer. But in this case, it's coming back immediately. Jamie straightened up and set his feet solidly in the dirt. Straightened, set solidly. The others, men have killed, sometimes killed for cause. Others in battle, strangers, men who he broke off, and Roger saw his whole body tighten. Jamie looked away down the path that led to the lake, as though something might be coming. The feeling was so strong that Roger looked too, and was relieved to see no more than a small covey of quail just bathing under a bush. Okay, you see the alliteration and the rhythm moving through that one? Jamie feels something coming toward him, something that is scaring him, and the feeling is so strong that Roger thinks he sees it too. And then we get the pastoral image of the quail dust bathing under a bush, and those soft bees picking up the rhythm. Jack Randall came to me 2 nights ago. Roger's stomach contracted so suddenly that he said, oof, out loud. Jamie stared at him and then laughed. That's what I said too, he assured Roger. A few other things besides, but I will not repeat them with Jimmy in earshot. There was a long pause filled with birdsong from the trees that shaded the malting shed, punctuated by the distant cries of ravens. I should show the shape of this. These exchanges, they're separate paragraphs. Keeping them spaced out because they have more impact if the reader is encountering them without a lot of surrounding text. You want a deep focus on this because it's deeply emotional stuff, but it's low key. Okay, I suppose Roger said at last that it doesn't matter what you said to him, but what did he say to you? Did he speak? Jamie looked down at the ground, and Roger could see the pulse beating at the side of his neck. No, he just laughed. That's the end of that scene. So I hope that has an impact. But you can see how the structure of the sentences, the rhythm of the sentences, and the distance that you keep, the overall shape of the conversation, minimal body language, minimal movement, that gives you more impact as to what's being said. So that's one kind of scene. There are a lot of other kinds. Do any of you have any specific questions that I can answer rather than just talking about stuff the way I read it?
Could I just trouble you to read the last sentence again?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Sure. Oh, where? Jamie looked down at the ground, and Roger could see the pulse beating at the side of his neck. Next sentence. No, he just laughed. Meaning Jack Randall.
Yeah.
And in his dream, which if I were Jamie Fraser, that would kind of unsettle me, because he's heard that man laugh before. Yeah, so some of these are somewhat different, depending on. Oh, somebody else had another question over here, I think. Yes, in back there.
Yeah, I was just wondering, when you're writing a series, or at least something where the ending kind of moves towards the next book, because you want to resolve the kind of A plot, if you will, of the first book. Do you have any suggestions or tips for how to kind of keep that ending kind of hanging, not so much like off a cliff, but resolving something and then leaving a bit more to kind of lead into the next book?
Well, yeah, there's different ways of doing that. There would be mostly the same techniques that you would use at the end of a chapter when you want to either to change gears and start at a different viewpoint is the most simple way of doing that, or to change to a different scene. But you could do it if you were going to continue with the same person's viewpoint. For instance, in Outlander, it's all in Claire's point of view, so it's always going to be her point of view. So ending there, it would usually end with something like either a strong feeling of unease or perhaps of contentment, which we know is momentary and so forth. But go inward to the character and use the character's feelings rather than an external event that closes the section. I mean, you can do it with atmosphere as well, would work. Or you can do it very abruptly by having someone enter the scene and, declare that war has started, or, that the laird has arrived at the castle and wants to see you right now, something like that. Yeah, so there's different ways of doing it. But essentially you want to evoke a sense of impendingness, of continuation. Yeah, and a feeling is fairly diffuse. So, if you have your reader feeling along with your character, they're going to also be feeling, oh my God, now what? Sort of thing. Yeah.
So in that excerpt, that's interesting because you started out with a simple question: are you afraid?
Mm-hmm.
And he never simply answers that, but it's answered throughout the whole
Yeah.
thing, and then wound up, and it winds up right at the end with the answer we've had, but we're
Mm-hmm.
not just coming up. It's really well done.
Thank you very much.
She knows how to write. Yeah, she sure does.
So it's like, and also in the paragraphs and stuff, like you're having little endings like throughout, which is what you talked about.
Yeah, exactly.
But then it wraps up to the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you want to evoke a rhythm that will take you through and address all these subtleties of communication and feeling, but will at the same time propel the story. Yeah. Yes, a question back there.
Yeah, when you're ending a scene that's primarily dialogue, how do you know where to cut it off? I mean, it tends to be rather sudden, but it has that sense of finality. How do you know where to put that?
Basically, I write that sentence and then I just stop because nothing else is happening. I think, okay, I see. Yeah, if I have written that and I feel that there's more that he should say or that I want to express, then that's not the end. And then I decide, well, is he going to add something to what he just said, or is he going to be interrupted by somebody, or are we going to switch back into the other person's point of view, or are we going to have something external happen that disrupts the intimacy of this scene? And in this case, I wanted to keep the scene intimate to the very end and complete, because finally, Jamie is admitting, his deepest fear, that he's actually being haunted by Jack Randall, that sort of thing.
Just
Yeah.
one more quick question about the quail. Like when you're putting these sort of surprisingly peaceful things, or is that just to increase the tension? Yeah. So that you
Yes, just to use the
to
contrasting
kind of
image.
relax. Oh no,
Yeah.
kind of relax.
Yeah.
Something horrific is coming up.
Yeah, and also the sense of, looking away from something horrific and seeking refuge in something down to earth, which, as Roger has been, startled into looking where Jamie's looking toward the oncoming ghost, and then like, no, I'm not looking there. Yeah, yes.
Have you ever had situations where you may have had Roger, in this case, respond to Jamie's comment, wrote that, and then gone back and say, you know what, it's way more effective to end it where we back up here?
Once in a while, yeah. I write so slowly that doesn't usually happen. But every now and again, yeah. And especially, sometimes I will write a scene and it's cohesive and it accomplishes more or less what I had in mind, but I can feel that it's not quite right. And so I'll kind of put that aside and then go back to it at some future point. Usually I find out that I wrote it from the wrong person's point of view, in which case I will just rewrite it and then it ends naturally where I want to. But if I find I'm explaining too much, then I know I'm not on the right track. But this is all very subjective, and it's different for every person and how they write, what kind of relationship you have with your characters and all that. I mean, I'm all my characters, so I feel what they're both feeling at this particular point. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
With regards to the alliteration that you're using, do you do that purposefully, or does that just sort of happen and then you're like, yeah, that just feels right, it sounds right? Or was that something that has shifted over the years?
I wasn't conscious of it in writing my earlier books, and now I am. It's mostly unconscious, but I reread what I'm writing frequently. Whenever I stop for a break, I can read back through this, and usually something will jog my attention if there's something slightly off or whatever, and often I will at that point see the alliteration that I have two of whatever it is and I mean three, like that. Or that there's two, but there can't be three because it will distort the whole sentence, so cut it back to one and do alliteration somewhere else. Yeah, the alliteration is a very subconscious kind of thing. Most readers would not even notice it. Yeah, anything else?
Well, I've been reading your stuff since like 1994, and I never picked up on that. So good job. It's beautiful.
Well, thank you. Okay, yes, you're not supposed to see that. Yeah, with luck, I mean, the story is composed of millions of little moving parts, and the reader is not supposed to see them moving. It's, like getting into a taxi. You're not thinking about, the electric battery or whether it's a Tesla until you try to get out and realize the door is There are some stories like that. Yeah, but usually you don't think about the mechanics of what you're experiencing. You're looking out of the window, you're seeing the person on the curb, you're worried that you left your umbrella at the restaurant, that sort of thing. And, where is the story? Is it in the vehicle that's carrying you toward your doom? Or is it, the lost umbrella that's going to let some stalker get into your apartment? Yeah. So anyway, it depends on what sort of story you're telling. And that depends in turn, as stories always do, who is the character and how well do you know them as part of that. If you're just beginning a story, you don't know your character very well yet. So the more you write about them, the more you will know about them, but also just thinking about them and, what do you know about them? When I realized I was writing a story set in Scotland, I started doing research on Scotland, and of course I was picking up all kinds of stuff, some of which I never needed, but a lot of which I just incorporated because I knew it, that was part of the natural parts of the scene. But just writing down what I knew about something, this was a good way to start if I was stuck on a given day, was just to look through one of my research books, pick up a recipe or something, and start typing it in. And because that would pull me into, the steps of making whatever this dish was, the physical steps. I would be thinking, well, who is this that's cooking, Well, where we are and so forth is probably Jenny Fraser Murray. Okay, and so what's she thinking about this? She's, a housewife, a very industrious housewife of the 18th century, meaning she's extremely skilled at a lot of different things, including cooking. But the sort of cooking that she's doing, well, it's a rabbit stew, okay? She has a rabbit, sitting on her table, that either she's killed herself or one of her menfolk has killed and left for her to use. Okay, what would you do if you were presented with a newly dead rabbit? Okay, and someone said, make food out of this. All right, well, what do you do? I would gut it myself, but I was a biologist. I know how to kill game. I don't because I don't like to, but I know how. And so, there's a skill to gutting an animal. You don't want me to go into it. But there is. Okay, so you would gut it and then you skin it normally. It's easier that way. And then you'd cut off the head and the legs. Probably you would joint the legs, moving around the hip and thigh muscle because you want to eat the thighs that are juicy and so forth. Whereas you remove the feet because they have nails. You eat those. But you might throw them out for the hogs to eat, and I'm not sure what you would do with the head. You might boil it, brain stew, things like that. I mean, they didn't waste anything in the 18th century. Food was scarce, And some of this I just know from being a biologist for a long time, and others I pick up, from the research. But yeah, in the Highlands in Scotland, you ate what there was, and there wasn't much. So given that I know the personality of the person doing the cooking, I'm thinking, is she cursing to herself about what a pain this is, or this isn't nasty or anything? No, this is what she does every day. She would, extract the sack of guts and, maybe weigh it and think, no, put it aside, or, put it in a basket to be taken out to the bin and thrown away. Or, if they have pigs, she'd throw it in the salt bucket. Things like that. And, is there something that can be done with the rabbit's feet, because they can be kept as, lucky charms. The idea being that rabbits are lucky, but obviously not this rabbit. So, you go with what you know, not only of the scene, the overall atmosphere and setting of what you're doing, but with the personality of the person that's doing it, as well as what they have on hand. And, some of these people are very funny, and some of them aren't. Yeah, I find that I just have a natural, I was born with a funny gene, sort of, and I can't keep from being funny, even when it is highly inappropriate. I guess maybe a long ago. No, really. No, really. Yes, yes, one of the first public appearances that we did for Outlander, you know, with me and the two show producers and the main cast members and so forth. We did it at this huge New York club called 92Y. And they were going to show the first episode of the first season after we finished our talk and so forth. And I don't remember what led up to this. Something did. I didn't just say it off the top of my head. But yeah, someone said something. There was a question from the audience about, you know, did I really like this? Was the wedding night good? And something. And they asked Sam Ewan. And he said, well, you know, I don't want to be immodest or anything. And I said, maybe you don't, but you have one fine ass, man. Oddly enough, 92Y has never invited me. Not very lost. Yeah, anyway, if you don't naturally have that kind of instinct, you know, I don't know what you do. I don't know any way of teaching people to be funny. But most people are, you know, in one way or another. At least they appreciate, you know, senses of humor in other people. So, you know, listen to the people around you, the people you know. My sister and cousins and so forth, they always would get bored and irritable at the Thanksgiving table because the old guys would start telling stories. My father would tell, you know, long, involved stories about life in New Mexico and Belen and so forth. I was always totally fascinated, and even more so when I started writing and realized that I tell stories the exact same way he did. To start at the top and, you know, start telling a story, meet a digression, go off, cover that, come back, come down, go back, cover that, and it would crisscross back and forth, and finally it would end and loop right back to where he started. Okay. Anyway, I never realized this consciously until after doing that. So anyway, a lot of this is knowing yourself, you know, what comes naturally to you. Or do you have a natural gift for dialogue, you know? Do you have a very strong sense of humor? Or are you, you know, drawn to sort of grim stories? Or, you know, you may not be grim. Most of the people who write really grim stuff are actually really cheerful, like Bob Duconi. Yeah, you know, they just have a good time reading about horrible people and nasty things. And yes, speaking not of anybody we know, sitting in the third row. Yeah. I've never seen anybody more gleeful about doing horrible things to people. But he was a lawyer to start with.
Do any of the characters in your mind's eye, are they now influenced by the actors like Sam and Katrina?
Really, no.
Do you keep them separate?
Oh, yeah.
And you prefer the one you created in your mind? I would say, obviously.
Well, they have better dialogue, yeah. I do write scripts every once in a while for the show, and they invariably mess with my dialogue. Yeah. Yes.
What's your secret for dialogue?
Keep it short for the most part. Yeah, and keep it very specific to the character. You know, some people like Claire are, you know, very sharply acerbic on occasion, and me as well. Whereas Jamie is a little more amiable and laid back. He will certainly say funny things, but, you know, it's not his main modus. Usually he's very straightforward, and he can be sympathetic and you know, sentimental on occasion and so forth. But he's low key, save when you're really roused about something. And when somebody's really roused about something, then you're using very short, punchy sentences and, you know, expletives and punctuated with, you know, sharp body movements and things like that. In those cases where you're dealing with strong external emotion, then you do have a lot of movement and, you know, slamming people's heads in car doors and, you know, putting your fist through the window and that sort of stuff. Yeah. Whereas, you know, for something like this, it's all internal what they're doing, and so it's pretty much all dialogue punctuated by just very small body movements to keep the reader anchored physically in the scene. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
Knowing your characters as well as you do you find they influence the plot more, or do you tell them what the plot is?
Oh, I've never told them anything. I just listen to them. See what happens. Thanks. Good luck. Yeah, don't feel at all, you know, embarrassed about leaving. I know people have blue pencils and pitch appointments and things like that all day. Or, you know, if you just get bored, that's fine too. Or overheated, it's really relief to be in a warm room for a change. Most people are frozen. Okay. This is about it. All right, this is a short one. And this is to do with endings of sentences mostly. And this is an unfamiliar point of view. This is in William's point of view. William is Jamie's illegitimate son, who has, you know, come seeking his birth father's help in rescuing